Shannon stood before the marble monument, gazing at the portrait of her aunt, her eyes fixed as if awaiting some miracle. She bit her lip, tears welling in her cheeks. Not long ago, she had a family, a home, a loving husband. But now everything had collapsed, leaving behind unbearable pain. If only she could command this pain to leave. But it heeded no orders, only weighed heavier on her heart. "Forgive me, Aunt," Shannon whispered. "And let Mom forgive me too. I'll see you soon, Aunt. Won't we sit and talk just like before? I miss you so much. But I don't want to live anymore. Lord, help me. Lord, it's so lonely and empty." Shannon lifted her head, looking upward through despair, through the despair gnawing in her chest. And she bitterly smiled. "Where are you expecting an answer from? No one will come, and no one will solve your problems." But suddenly someone placed a hand on her shoulder. She turned and through tears saw an older man before her. His face was plain, but his gaze was attentive and kind. He seemed about to speak but paled and gripped his cane tighter. Shannon feared he might collapse. Are you okay?" she asked anxiously, studying the stranger's face. "And you?" he replied. "Very bad," Shannon whispered, lowering her gaze. "I can see that." The man nodded, taking her arm. "Let's sit on the bench. I'm exhausted, and I think there's something we need to talk about. You're Shannon, right?" His dark eyes sparkled mysteriously. "My Lynette's niece." "Yes." "And who are you? And why do you call my aunt my Lynette?" "My name is Jacob Benson. I loved your aunt. Loved her more than anything in life. And I've seen you before." Shannon gasped. "There was a photo of you with Auntie. Only you were younger in it." "I'm sorry. That's why I didn't recognize you." "It's okay. It's nothing," Jacob said thoughtfully, settling on the bench. "Let's talk, Shannon. It's necessary for both of us. What happened to you?" "Something bad." Shannon waved her hand. "Everything that could happen, happened. Aunt Lynette always supported me, and I miss her terribly." "And me too," Jacob nodded. "I wanted to give her the world, but all I managed was this monument." "So, you're the one who erected it?" "Ha." Shannon smiled. "My husband and I were wondering who did it. You know, she was very proud and never accepted gifts from me. Proud, smart Lynette." The man fell silent, lost in his thoughts. Shannon too fell silent, tears filling her eyes. And only Lynette smiled, watching them from the portrait, as if she too remembered her life. So long and so difficult. A simple country girl, not shining with beauty or exceptional talents. Shannon thought her fate was to finish school, attend college, and work on the local farm. Although her aunt told her she needed to set higher goals. "But what's there to do in your backwater town?" she'd ask when Shannon visited her in the city. Shannon, aspire to something. Dream. And most importantly, make concrete plans, not just castles in the air. You'll succeed, her aunt would say. Shannon's mother, Jolene, disagreed with Lynette. "She's needed here," she grumbled. "It's you who left for the city, teaching everyone here about life. Miss Know-it-all. One should silently envy." Lynette smiled at her sister. "And a child shouldn't be fed these medieval ideas about life. Who's envying you, Miss Know-it-all?" However, Jolene's words held no malice. Shannon felt her mom genuinely loved her sister Lynette and was glad she achieved what she dreamt of. Shannon didn't know her father. In her childhood, her mother told her he was a pilot who disappeared on a routine flight. Disappeared? How can one disappear like that? Shannon wondered. "It's possible," her mother grumbled. "Probably aliens abducted him. Or he flew into the Bermuda Triangle." Shannon read articles in magazines about aliens and the Bermuda Triangle. Her father's fate seemed mysterious and somewhat scary to her. Only with age did she understand her mother was simply hiding the truth from her. Of course, her suspicions turned out to be true. When she turned 13, her mother told her that her father was a geologist. His camp was located not far from the village where Jolene lived. Naturally, the local girls couldn't ignore this fact. Beautiful, smart guys with a great sense of humor, bored without female company in the evenings. And the girls often visited the geologists to sit by the campfire. One of them was Shannon's father. His name was Brett. He wasn't handsome, but he was incredibly charming. And Shannon's mother, Jolene, caught his eye immediately. Pretty, robust, blonde hair, round, rosy face, a sprinkle of freckles on her nose. A typical small-town girl. What else did one need for a short-lived happiness? Brett's manners captivated Jolene. He was different from the local boys, kissing her wind-chapped hand when they met and giving her bouquets of wild flowers. Her heart melted then. Jolene didn't notice anything around her, neither the astonished eyes of her sister nor the wary eyes of her mother, nor her father's smiling and attentive eyes. She saw only Brett. The world around Jolene seemed to explode and vanish. There was only one joy left. Her and him. And nothing else in the world. Soon enough, Brett mentioned he had to return to the city. He came from the north and had no plans to stay with his lover, whom he sometimes jokingly referred to as his field wife. Jolene asked Brett if he intended to take her with him. Brett replied negatively. He sincerely seemed surprised that Jolene planned serious commitment with him, because he viewed their affair simply as a pleasant pastime. Jolene, you're a very beautiful girl, and I enjoy being with you, but you must understand that we're not meant for each other. What do you mean we're not meant for each other? And who are you meant for? Jolene frowned. Well, I have a fiancé. When I go back, we'll have a wedding. Brett shrugged. And for now, I'm a free man, which means I can do whatever I want. There's no ring on my finger, as you've noticed. A free man. Jolene yelled. No ring on your finger? Well, you're about to miss a few other things. The world where it was just him and her suddenly shattered. It turned out to be so fragile. Their little world for two. Stories of how Jolene chased him with an axe all over the village were told for a long time. Brett hurried to leave, realizing that Jolene was serious and could seriously injure him. Brett left, and Jolene grieved for several months. And then she realized she was expecting a baby. Naturally, neither she nor Brett thought about protection. She was sure that since they ended up in bed, her beloved had serious intentions and would definitely marry her. And Brett simply didn't bother with protection. What for? If he was soon going home to reunite with his future wife. Jolene immediately informed her parents about these two facts, the end of the affair and the pregnancy, and they accepted both facts. They accepted them with resignation. After all, why be upset? Everything ended well. The girl no longer tormented herself with this love. And the child is a blessing. Mom quietly cried in the kitchen, wiping Jolene's tears. As long as a healthy child is born, Jolene, her father absent-mindedly said. They say those geologists get irradiated in uranium mines. Who knows what he's been exposed to there? Dad. Jolene paled. Please don't say that. Everything will be fine. Jolene's sister, Lynette, who had already moved to the city by then, was initially unhappy that her sister was expecting a child. Now you are stuck here forever. That's for sure, Lynette said during another visit to their parents. Jolene's belly was noticeably rounding by then. You could have still left. But with a child, not your business. Sit a girl. Jolene stuck her tongue out at Lynette, as she used to do in childhood. And Lynette laughed. Why do you need a child? You're still a child yourself. Silly you. Naive and silly. Jolene's daughter, whom they named Shannon, was born healthy and calm. Even as a baby, she really cried, as if apologizing for her unexpected arrival in the family. She simply politely grunted, as if saying, could someone please change my diapers? And sorry for wetting myself. Everyone rushed to the little one at her quiet grunts, as if trying to prove to Shannon their love and her absolutely desired presence in the house. Jolene decided not to look for Brett. He had hurt her too much. He had wounded her pride too deeply. Meanwhile, Shannon quickly became the family favorite. They called her the perfect child. Shannon hardly ever got sick, developed excellently, and learned to speak and read early. She hardly caused any problems for her mother. As Shannon grew up, she laughed at her childish thoughts herself and amused her beloved aunt, Lynette, with her stories. Lynette always brought Shannon gifts, beautiful dresses, sweets, and toys. And after playing with her niece, Lynette hugged her sister. "Well, Jolene, how's life in the village? Don't you regret not coming with me to the city? Maybe you'd have found a husband there. What about the candidates here?" Lynette teased during one of her visits to their parents. "What candidates?" Jolene chuckled. "They're all the same. Take Toby, for example. Lives with his mom, earns pennies, but he can drink 3 liters of beer in one go. Or Dennis. Remember, Lynette, our neighbor. He's already had 2 wives run away from him. Now he's looking for a 3rd. Well, there you go. See?" Lynette laughed. "The choices here aren't great." "Don't even start," Jolene joked. "Don't tell me in the city it's any different. You're not married yet, either, and there are guys like that in the city, even worse. But I'll find and love a worthy man and get married. And if not, then I'll just live like that, alone. Like one philosopher said, it's better to go hungry than to eat anything, and better to be alone than with just anyone." "Well, I'm certainly no philosopher," Jolene smiled. "And before I understand anything, I'll definitely get into it first. I think the same way. Otherwise I'd have been living with Toby or Dennis long ago." "Well, so what?" said Lynette. "You wanted to stay here yourself." "I did." Jolene nodded. "And I don't regret staying in the village at all. I have everything I need. I have a daughter, my own house, and a job, after all. And I don't need just any man on the couch." Shannon was in high school when her grandparents passed away. And now the family consisted only of Shannon and her mother, Jolene. Aunt Lynette visited rarely, but every time she called, she invited her sister and niece over, promising to show them the city. Shannon was quite content with her life. She thought that, like her mom, she would spend her whole life in the village. Maybe she would even get married eventually. Jolene often told her daughter that she should look for a good and reliable man, and hurry up. The good ones get taken quickly. Jolene would say, "But Mom, what if I don't manage to find one, and they're all taken?" Little Shannon would worry. "They won't all be taken." Jolene assured her confidently, "You're beautiful and smart. You'll definitely find a great guy for yourself. Just don't call the stork without a husband." Shannon was afraid to ask her mother what she meant by that. She shared her guesses with her school friend Avis. "Calling the stork without a husband means getting pregnant out of wedlock." "Got it," Avis explained to her. "So, does it mean Mom had me out of wedlock?" Shannon exclaimed in surprise. Avis pondered. "Well, it seems so." In the evening, Shannon asked her mother the question that had been troubling her. Jolene nodded. "Well, yes, Avis is right. And is that bad, Mom?" "No, it's good. You're my joy. You, Shannon, are the meaning of my life. But, you know, sometimes you just wish someone was there beside you." Jolene sighed. "But don't do as I did, dear. Understand? Of course, it's not entirely right. You should have children when you have a family. I mean, a husband, your own home, stability. But so many young girls get trapped in the whirlpool of love. Their eyes stop seeing, their ears stop hearing, and their heads stop thinking. And that's it. I can't imagine how I would have lived if I didn't have you. Just take care of yourself, my dear. Don't trust the first person you meet, Shannon. You're still very young, and your life should be different. When you finish school, I'll send you to Lynette. You'll live in the city, study, work. Look at your aunt. Look at all she's achieved. And you, Shannon, will be fine." Jolene told her daughter. Just don't repeat my mistakes, sweetheart. And Shannon nodded and hugged her mom. And the very next day, for the first time, the girl saw her future husband, Derek. His parents had moved from the neighboring village. Derek's father was an agronomist, and his mother was a zootechnician. They were offered jobs and even helped to buy a small house. Miss Lang, Shannon's teacher, came to class and brought along a handsome, tall, well-dressed boy. Well, 10th grade, Miss Lang said, "Meet Derek. He'll be studying with you from now on. I hope you'll become friends. Derek, see where there are free seats. Sit down, and let's start the lesson. You can get to know each other better during the break." Derek scanned the entire class, and although there were other empty seats, he walked between the desks and sat right next to Shannon. "Hey, is this seat taken?" He smiled, and for some reason, Shannon blushed. "No, it's free. Sit down, of course. Just don't copy her in math. She can barely keep up herself." The class beauty Mercy turned to them. There was a mixture of contempt and envy on her face. She hoped this handsome guy would choose her, so she couldn't resist making a spiteful remark. "She's dumb anyway. You shouldn't have picked her. But just so you know, if you need help with math, it's me. And chemistry too." "Thanks. But I'm pretty good at math and chemistry myself," Derek replied calmly. Derek neatly placed his textbooks on the edge of the table and glanced at Mercy again. "And by the way, labeling others isn't a sign of intelligence." Mercy flared up after his words. She said something quietly, but neither Derek nor Shannon heard her words. Derek, because he wasn't interested in what she was saying, and Shannon because of the loud thumping of her own heart. She felt like everyone could hear it beating, and wondered why no one was looking at her or pointing fingers. Meanwhile, Miss Long continued the lesson calmly. Everyone was taking notes of what she was saying, and only Derek leaned quietly towards his deskmate. "You didn't tell me your name," he whispered. "Shannon," she whispered back. The girl blushed. "Beautiful name," Derek wrote on a piece of notebook paper. "My favorite." Shannon read the note and blushed even more. She fell in love at first sight, and although she was afraid to admit it to herself, she still understood that there was nothing she could do about it anymore. Derek became a real friend to her. She liked listening to him because he read so much. He traveled a lot and talked about his plans. "I'm going to the city after school to study programming there. It's the profession of the future. Mark my words. Soon computers will be everywhere. And not like they are now, but much, much better." "Shannon, as my dad says, progress never stands still." "But it's so hard," Shannon said. "You need to know so much." "It's nothing," Derek said, "but you won't be out of work, and they pay a lot for it, especially if you get into a big company." "Oh, I couldn't do that," the girl sighed. "There's so much math involved. My head would just explode. I love writing essays. I also like history, biology, and of course, literature. But math and physics are just not for me." "It's not that difficult there either," Derek smiled. "You just need to put in the effort. I've been preparing for university since 8th grade, so I think it should work out. What about you? What do you want to be?" The girl shrugged. "I don't know. I'm not very talented. That's why I haven't decided yet. Mom also wants to send me to the city. I have an aunt there. She's very smart, and she loves me. I'm sure she'll advise me something good." "Well, that's great." Derek smiled, and Shannon felt butterflies in her soul from that smile. One day Avis approached Derek. "Derek, who are you going to dance with at the school ball?" she asked him. "I propose myself as a candidate. We're the same height, and we'll look simply splendid together." Derek turned and looked at Shannon, who was now very angry. "Thanks, but your candidacy doesn't suit me. I already have a dance partner." And Derek pointed to Shannon. Avis snorted and walked away. And Shannon looked at Derek. "Why did you turn her down? She's the prettiest in the class, after all." "You're silly. There's no one prettier than you." "Shannon, in this class. At least, not for me. I love you. Derek whispered the last words so quietly that Shannon could hardly hear them, or maybe she just read them on his lips. Her heart pounded loudly, and butterflies appeared in her soul again. I love you too, she replied and lowered her gaze. Time passed. The prom came and went. Everyone was preparing for exams, and Shannon also sat over her textbooks. But the lines often blurred before her eyes, and her thoughts wandered far away. What would happen to her and Derek next? Of course, he would go to the city and become a programmer, just as he wanted. He himself said that such specialists are well paid. So he would earn well, maybe even buy himself a car. Yes, a bright future awaited him. Shannon believed in it. And his parents believed too. They did everything for their son. And they really didn't want Derek to tie his life with Shannon. Son, please, think about your studies. They constantly urged him. You shouldn't have any girls on your mind right now. And what kind of love is this after all? You are a promising boy. And what about your Shannon? We don't understand. What could you see in her? Derek didn't argue with his parents, but he didn't refuse Shannon either. Of course, he didn't tell her that they didn't like her. He didn't want to upset the girl. But in a small village, nothing could be hidden, and Shannon knew all this herself. She was just a girl who would forever live in the village, and Derek was unlikely to want to be with her here. She didn't even dream of marrying him, but she still loved him with that same, first and very bright love that they write about in books. The parents, well, they could be understood. They dreamed that their son would find an educated, urban girl, preferably with her own apartment and well-off parents, of course. And Shannon didn't fit these criteria. However, her mother Jolene also treated her daughter's friendship with Derek skeptically. But she was used to calling things by their names, and therefore spoke frankly. You know what I'll tell you, daughter. A glove is good. A boot is also fine. But together they're not a pair. Understand? Because a glove should be with a glove, and a boot with a boot. That's harmony. So, does that mean I'm a glove? Shannon was upset. And Derek and I are not a match at all. Just because I'm a country girl, and he's going to the city, right? Does that mean I can't be happy now? Well, you know, daughter. Don't be angry. Jolene frowned. I wish you well. And a person needs to find someone suitable for themselves. Look at me. Look, I made a mistake once. Chose a guy who wasn't on my level. Now I'm alone all my life. Mom, local men courted you, one after another, but you rejected them all. Does that mean they're not on your level again? But you're from the same village, aren't you? Why is that? Jolene waved her daughter off with a towel. Oh, forget it, Shannon. You've completely confused me. I'll say it again. Don't get involved with that Derek. They don't want you. Their whole family is stuck up. They don't even say hello. That's it. You'd better take a closer look at Noah. He's a good guy, kind. His parents are simple. And he really likes you, Mom. Shannon said. Noah is almost 3 years older than me. I have nothing to talk to him about. You know, he's only interested in cars. Why do I need all that? Interesting. Jolene squinted. And what do you, daughter, talk about with your Derek? Well, Mom, Shannon smiled. Derek is not like Noah. He reads a lot. He's been to many places. He likes watching different movies. And then he tells me everything. Mom, I'm really interested in Derek. I'm curious to see how all this will end. Jolene muttered. And don't you dare, daughter, allow him anything extra. She shouted after her departing daughter. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Shannon? Don't you dare. And Shannon didn't dare. They never went beyond kisses. And although she really liked it when he held her close or stroked her back, she understood perfectly well that the time for something more hadn't come yet. And only when he was around, her breath caught, and her head spun heavily. To herself, Shannon decided that Derek would be her first and only man. She didn't even tell him about it. Shannon just waited for the day to come when something would happen between them. Something magical. It happened on its own on a hot May day. They sunbathed for a long time by the lake, and eventually Shannon got so badly burned that her skin felt like it was on fire. The girl couldn't bait and burst into tears. Derek started to comfort her. Mom and Dad went to the city. They won't be back until evening. Let's go to my place. Mom has a special burn ointment. It's very expensive, but it'll work immediately. Let's go. Shannon sniffled. She walked alongside Derek, groaning from the pain in her back and arms. Her skin was red, and when Derek asked her to take off her tank top at his house, she did it with relief. With careful movements, Derek applied the ointment to the burned areas, but then his hands touched other parts of her body. And suddenly Shannon realized that she no longer felt any pain. Incredible sensations brought her a storm of emotions. Goosebumps ran over her skin. She didn't notice how she turned to Derek, and their lips met. And then they lay silently for a long time, in each other's arms, trying to deal with their pounding hearts. Shannon knew for sure that she would never forget what had happened between them now, for the rest of her days. For almost a week, they continued to meet at school, seeing each other in the evenings, but they didn't talk about what had happened, as if nothing had happened. And then, without saying a word, they went to the lake again, where, in the tall grass, they belonged to each other once more. To her surprise, Shannon noticed that Derek had become more attentive to her now, and he somehow strangely and very quickly matured. "You are mine now," he told her. "Truly mine, Shannon. Understand?" She nodded and didn't hide her happy eyes from him. Next to him, her body felt light as a feather, and all the bad thoughts vanished from her mind. It was as if there were no upcoming exams, no need to apply anywhere, and no mom nagging about unwashed dishes in the sink. All of those were such trivial matters not worth paying attention to. Here she was. Here was Derek. They would never part and would be very happy despite everything. But in July, almost immediately after the final exams, Derek told the girl some unpleasant news. "Shannon, I'm leaving soon. It's all decided. I prepared the necessary documents. Dad even sorted out the issue with my accommodation. I told him he's rushing things. After all, I haven't been accepted to college yet. But, you see, my parents are sure that everything will work out for me, and I will get him." "Of course you will." Shannon nodded and then suddenly looked at him with a sad expression. "What about me, Derek? How am I supposed to live without you? Are we never going to see each other again?" "Well, how can you say such a thing?" Derek hugged the girl tightly. "Of course, we'll see each other, Shannon. Definitely. I'm not leaving you. I'm just going to study. And you wait a bit. As soon as I settle in the city, I'll find some work. I'll study during the day, work in the evenings, rent an apartment. And then you'll move in with me." "Agreed, agreed." Shannon smiled, but then the smile faded from her lips. "What if you forget about me after all? Find yourself another sitter girl. They're different there, you know. As my mom says, you're a glove." "What does a glove have to do with anything?" Derek didn't understand. Shannon waved her hand. "It doesn't matter. I'll tell you later." "You're silly, my beloved fool." And Derek hugged Shannon. "I don't need anyone but you. I love you, Shannon. But you want to live well, so you have to endure while I study. Your husband will have a good education, and you'll be proud of me, and you'll be my husband." Shannon's voice trembled. "I will. And I'll take you with me at the first opportunity. Promise?" Shannon asked. "I swear." Derek replied seriously. He left, and Shannon stayed in the village, fending off her mother's nagging. "Have you decided which faculty you'll apply to?" Jolene asked her daughter. Shannon shrugged. "I don't care. What difference does it make? As long as I get a diploma, and I can work anywhere, Mom." "Well, don't talk nonsense to me," Jolene snapped. "I do care. Go study to be an accountant." "Mom, are you serious?" How could I be an accountant when I could barely handle math at school? I'd make mistakes all the time. Can you imagine what would happen if everyone got paid less than they should? It's better to be a bad accountant than a good milker. Jolene said, you'll sit in a cozy bright office at the computer with a manicure and a nice hairstyle, and everyone will respect you. You know how much respect our farm accountant gets. Or do you want to spend your whole life painting walls? I don't. Shannon agreed. But I won't become an accountant. It's all math. It's okay, my dear. Listen to your teachers and do what they say. You'll figure it out somehow. You're no worse than others. Shannon couldn't argue with her mother, so she enrolled in college to study accounting. However, in September, her health took a turn, and she started skipping classes. Why are you home again? Jolene asked one day when she realized Shannon wasn't going anywhere. I feel really sick, Mom, the girl complained. Something's wrong in my stomach, and I feel nauseous. Then I'd be sick too if you were poisoned. We eat together. Jolene frowned. She approached and placed her palm on her daughter's forehead. No temperature, it seems. And your throat doesn't hurt? No, it doesn't hurt. Shannon shook her head. It doesn't seem like a cold, daughter. Do you have a stomach upset? Well, Mom, Shannon exclaimed, I don't have anything like that. Just nausea. I feel very weak, and my head is spinning. Jolene slowly sank into the chair opposite her daughter, dropping the kitchen towel to the floor. Shannon, she whispered, tell me, have you been feeling nauseous for a while? For a month now, Mom. Maybe a little earlier. I'm not sure. At first, I thought it was a stomachache, maybe gastritis. Now I'm really scared. What's wrong with me? It won't go away. Shannon looked at her mother with concern, not understanding why she had such a strange expression on her face. Of course, daughter, gastritis. Jolene smiled sadly. And in 6 months, we'll be coming up with a name for your gastritis. What do you mean? Shannon looked up at her mother, trying to understand where she was going with this. My dear, Jolene said affectionately, did something happen with Derek? Didn't it? What happened? Shannon didn't understand. You know, the thing that makes babies. Jolene raised her eyebrows. Did it happen or not? Just be honest. I won't scold you. Shannon lowered her head and sighed. We did it, Mom. A couple of times. Jolene silently watched her daughter. Shannon tried to understand the expression on her mother's face, unsure if it was anger or surprise. Gastritis, you say? Jolene leaned on the table, resting her chin on her hands. Gastritis is good. Gastritis is wonderful. Get ready to see the doctor. Let's see what they say about your gastritis. That day, Shannon didn't go to college. Instead, she went to the hospital with her mother. As they approached the hospital, the girl had no strength left, and she struggled to keep from fainting. Leaving her daughter in the corridor, Jolene went somewhere, but she returned after just 5 minutes, accompanied by a pleasant-looking middle-aged woman in a white coat. It was Dr. Louisa Waters, who had spent her entire career at this hospital and had once even treated Jolene herself. Let's take a look at your girl, Louisa said. The examination didn't take long, but Shannon felt unwell again. Louisa emerged from behind the curtain and nodded to Jolene, who understood everything without words. Well, Jolene, here's a referral for an ultrasound. The doctor handed her a small sheet of paper. Go with your daughter right away. They'll see you immediately, and then come back to me. Shannon was scared of the examination, thinking it would be very painful. But it turned out fine. She was placed on the examination table, her shirt lifted, and a sticky cold substance applied to her stomach. Well, the doctor pressed her instrument lightly against Shannon's abdomen. You have a developing pregnancy, about 10 weeks along. Weight a minute. She squinted suddenly. I see 2 fertilized eggs, the doctor replied. 2. Shannon turned her head. Her mother, Jolene, chuckled sadly. And you thought you had 1 gastritis? Dear, turns out You have two, she joked. Well, congratulations, sweetheart. What gastritis? The doctor suddenly looked at Jolene with concern. Is your daughter being treated by a gastroenterologist? No, we're all healthy. But I might as well see a psychiatrist. Jolene winked at her daughter. Becoming a grandmother all of a sudden, with two grandchildren. That's quite something. Then you can go up, the doctor said dryly. She didn't share Jolene's mood and silently handed Shannon a tissue. And am I really pregnant? Shannon sat on the examination table, wiping her stomach and staring at the monitor. She couldn't understand the dark spots alternating with light stripes displayed on it. And there were two tiny dots against the dark background. Yes, here. The doctor pointed to the dots. This is the first fetus. And this is the second. Of course, I can't tell you the gender yet. Maybe in a couple of weeks. Two fetuses, Shannon whispered. There are two of them. Well, maybe because you managed twice. So there are two. Jolene joked again. The girl is already stressed. The doctor interrupted her. Mom, let's calm down. Who am I? A mom? A grandmother? It turns out. Jolene took Shannon's hand. Yes, sweetheart, you've given me quite a surprise. What are we going to do now? As my mom used to say, since they're already here, there's nothing we can do. Are you going to give birth? The doctor tilted her head. Well, how can I not give birth? Shannon suddenly exclaimed. How? There are options, the doctor said. But you made the right choice. Congratulations on your pregnancy. What a joy. Like a celebration. Jolene replied. They were silent on the way home. Shannon getting used to the news she had heard and was trying to comprehend that she was pregnant. And with twins. Just like that. And she's only 18. How will Derek react? Will he be happy? They sometimes talked about having children someday, but not so soon. Derek believed they should first get an education, stand on their own feet, buy a house, and only then think about starting a family. His parents thought the same way. But what could they do now that it had happened? Shannon was sure he would take the news with joy because Derek loves her so much. And she loves him. So, they'll be able to overcome all the difficulties. Jolene remained silent the entire way back and only spoke to Shannon when they entered the house. All right, daughter, let's talk seriously now. Is the father of the children your Derek? Mom, what are you saying? Of course, it's him. Shannon protested. I haven't been with anyone else. He's the only one. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. How could you think that about me? Mom, I'm with Derek because I love him. Am I really like someone who would cheat on their partner? Wait, don't cry. Jolene stroked her daughter's shoulder. Understand, I had to ask, daughter. Because now it's not just our problem, but also Derek's and his parents' a problem. Shannon looked at her mother, her eyes full of tears. Are children a problem? Oh, you foolish girl. Foolish. Jolene said. Well, of course, it's not that simple. You won't be able to study now. You won't have time for that. You'll need good nutrition, money for doctors, then childbirth, preparing for childbirth. All of that isn't cheap. And then, it's just the beginning. Children need to be fed, clothed, taken care of. I'm sorry for talking about money, but that's life, daughter. When I gave birth to you, my parents helped me a lot. But there were two of them, and you're alone, and now it's the other way around. I'm alone, and you have two children. I'll go to work. And Derek too. Shannon placed her hand on her stomach, as if trying to protect the children from future problems. Go to bed. Worker, you've already worked enough. And I'll go talk to Derek's parents. Jolene sighed heavily. Mom, maybe you shouldn't. Shannon was scared. How could she forget about Derek's parents? What will they say? Why did you turn so pale? Huh? Her mother smiled. We're adults and we need to figure things out somehow. Mom, don't go. Shannon said. I'll tell Derek myself. He'll come soon when the holidays start. I can call him. Shannon really didn't want her mother to go to Derek's parents. What if something went wrong? How would she face them then? When your Derek comes, Shannon, you'll already have a big belly. Jolene said. Okay, go to sleep. I'll go cheer up the future grandparents. And with that, Jolene went out the door, leaving her daughter alone. While waiting for her mother, Shannon wandered around the house, not knowing what to do with herself. She was terribly nervous. What will Derek's parents say? They definitely won't be happy, although maybe everything will be fine. They'll come over now, and they'll sit down at the table and discuss all the details of the upcoming wedding. Shannon didn't doubt for a minute that they would definitely have a wedding. I wonder what dress she'll wear. Will she have to buy a maternity dress? No, Shannon didn't want that. Everyone would point fingers and laugh at her. So, they need to hurry. Maybe Derek can take a break from his university for a couple of weeks so they can prepare everything. And Shannon's thought was interrupted by the loud sound of the door slamming shut. Mom, what happened? Shannon rushed into the hallway. Jolene kicked off her sandals. Her face was red, her eyes bloodshot. That tramp. Jolene shouted. She should have raised her son first before saying anything to me. Can you imagine, huh? Jolene clenched her fists. Saying something like that to me. She should have looked after her son first, and then opened her mouth. What a vile woman. Mom. Shannon didn't know what to do. And what? Mom. What? Mom. Jolene quickly worked past her daughter and flopped down on the couch. Shannon followed her. What did they say? The girl asked quietly. They said a lot of things. That tramp. Jolene frowned. She said, for example, that I don't look after my daughter properly. Can you imagine? That I myself became a mother early, from who knows who, and raised you the same way. And you, also from who knows who. You understand, daughter? Ha ha. She should have taught her son to think before taking his pants off in front of girls. Mom. Shannon sat on the edge of the couch. Seriously, what happened? Can you tell me? Do they not want me to have the babies? For some time, Jolene muttered something quietly to herself. And then she began to speak. It turned out that Derek's parents didn't even let her into the house when they found out that Shannon was expecting twins from their son. And they said that Derek was not involved in this event. We've never had twins in our family, Derek's father said. Well, we did, Jolene replied. It's unclear who your daughter got pregnant from. Derek's mother pursed her lips. Maybe from your neighbor or some classmate. Why should we even believe her? That's exactly what needs to be proven, nodded the father. And a lot is said about your family in the village. And about who your daughter were born from. Don't you dare, Jolene whispered. Don't you dare touch my family. How are you any better? Ha. And if she is pregnant? Derek's mother said again. He's only 18. He's just starting to live, studying at university. Do you know how much money we've spent on this? And do you want him to drop everything and come work on the farm here? Ha. For the sake of children who might not even be his. That won't happen. What are you saying? Jolene paled. My daughter tells me the truth. The children are Derek's. She had no one else. Well, she could be telling you anything. Maybe she's lying. Derek's father smirked skeptically. You know what, my dears? I came here to talk to you nicely. I thought you were decent people, and we could calmly discuss everything. But you're behaving like scoundrels. Decided to blame everything on the girl. I won't allow it, Jolene stated firmly. You impudent woman, Derek's mother said. Get out of here already. Don't embarrass yourself here. Fine, I'll go. And you won't see your grandchildren. You'll stand by the windows begging. And I won't let you. Jolene turned sharply and almost ran home, where her daughter was waiting. They said that. Shannon asked. That I'm from. Unknown. Don't listen to them, daughter. Jolene sat down next to Shannon. Have they seen themselves in the mirror? We'll raise your children. Don't worry. Although, I didn't want to be a grandmother at 37. But what can you do? That's fate. And Shannon hugged her mother, inhaling her scent. So familiar and cozy. Mom, I'll still call Derek. He'll definitely be happy and won't reject me. She whispered. Don't call. Daughter, don't. Jolene stroked Shannon's head. Who could such parents raise? Ha, the same scoundrel. The same as they are. We don't need anyone. We'll manage on our own. And they'll crawl back to us. They'll crawl on their knees. Shannon, mark my words. And we'll send them away. Shannon cried. What if Derek really is just like his parents? And all he wants is to live his life. And she is with her children. He did leave, after all, leaving Shannon alone. And he doesn't even call. Well, he does, of course, but too rarely, once a week or less. He has a new life in the city now. And it seems there's no place for her, Shannon, in that life. It's okay, Mom, I'll call him. Let him tell me himself. She said. For 3 days, Shannon dialed the familiar number. But every time she heard a mechanical voice on the other end. The subscriber is out of the coverage area. Eventually, she became furious and threw the phone on the floor so hard it almost broke. Well, fine. Subscriber. She whispered. I guess I'm out of coverage too. And Shannon didn't call Derek again. Didn't even try. There were no news from him either. And the girl decided that their relationship was over. He probably found someone else, better. From the city, she thought. Crying at night. Hoping her mother wouldn't hear her. But Jolene herself had been through all of this, and therefore understood her daughter perfectly. The only thing she didn't know was that Shannon would have to endure twice as much as Jolene herself. And it was all because of Derek's parents. They constantly insulted Shannon whenever they met. Jolene was exhausted. Her daughter was constantly crying, afraid to go outside, and had lost a lot of weight due to stress. Derek's parents couldn't calm down either. No matter how many times Jolene went to their house and demanded they leave the girl alone, they wouldn't listen. Both sides refused to hear each other. In the midst of all this, Jolene received a call from her sister Lynette. Hi, dear. How are you guys doing? I haven't heard from you in a while. Oh, Lynette, I can't take it anymore. Jolene, carrying the pain and despair all this time, burst into tears. Jolene, why didn't you tell me anything? Exclaimed Lynette. Why didn't you inform me? I don't even know. She sobbed. So much has piled up. But I'm most worried about Shannon. She's lost weight. And those scoundrels won't leave her alone. She's scared to go outside because of them. But this is unacceptable, said Lynette, comforting her sister and promising that she would come up with something. And a day later, she arrived in the village, not alone, but with Derek. Why did you come here? Shannon said. You've become a sitter boy. Ha! Get out of here. Find yourself other brides. You're not needed here. Hey, calm down. Calm down. Lynette decided to intervene. Shannon, listen. Let him speak. Derek, come in. Come in. Shannon pouted and moved aside, letting Derek into the house. I didn't know anything. Derek looked at her with a sincere gaze. Well, I did know. But something completely different, Shannon. My mom called me and said that you were dating one guy and then another, and you believed her. Wouldn't you believe your mom if she told you that? He countered. Derek. Shannon was almost breathless with indignation. If only you knew what was happening here. He smiled and stepped towards her. I already know everything. Your aunt found me at the university. Can you imagine? And right there she shocked me with the news that you're expecting twins. And what are you going to do? Shannon asked. I'm here, he said. He pulled a box out of his pocket and handed it to her. Shannon's eyes glistened with tears. 2 silver rings lay on the white satin. Shannon, I'm sorry I couldn't afford gold, but one day I'll definitely give you a gold ring. And not just one. Shannon felt relieved. And if Derek hadn't caught her, she probably would have fallen. He sat her down on the couch and sat down next to her. Lynette took her sister's hand. Jolene, let them talk. And we'll go. Have some tea. Okay. It took almost 2 hours before Derek came out from talking to Shannon. She fell asleep. He told Jolene and Lynette, Derek, sit down. Stay with us. Jolene suggested. But the boy shook his head. No. I need to go and talk to my parents. But I'll be back. No one ever found out what happened in Derek's house. But that same evening, he himself, along with his parents, came to Shannon's house and officially asked Jolene for her daughter's hand. Shannon threw herself into her beloved's arms, but the adults were tense and couldn't start the conversation. Once again, Shannon's aunt, Lynette, found a way out. She went to the kitchen, then returned with a tray containing snacks, a bottle of wine, and glasses. All right. Let's have a drink, she suggested. The situation, of course, isn't the easiest. But we are adults and we should solve all problems like adults. And most importantly, peacefully. And so it happened. Jolene set the table, and over a long dinner, they finally discussed everything. Derek had to continue his studies and find some simple part-time work in his free time. Shannon would go to the city with him. For the time being, Lynette was ready to accommodate them. And then, when things eased up a bit and they had enough money, the young couple could rent an apartment and start living as a separate family. And when your children are born, said Lynette, we'll take turns helping you. After all, they'll have 3 grandmothers. That's much better than just one. Right, many years have passed since then. In Shannon and Derek's family, 2 daughters grew up. They're common darlings and mischief makers. Derek worked as a programmer, as he always wanted, and Shannon eventually became an accountant, but worked as a saleswoman in a regular store. They had their own apartment now, and Shannon was incredibly happy with how her life had turned out. Shannon's mom still lived in the village. Jolene didn't like the city much and rarely visited. She preferred it when her daughter and her family came to visit her, just like that, on weekends or holidays. But Shannon's aunt, Lynette, worried her. Lately, she didn't look very good, but true to her habit, she never complained and just laughed off her niece's concerns. Why are you so worried about me? Is your life really that boring that you've decided to focus on me? Maybe I should tell Derek to come home late a couple of times. Then your attention will switch to him. This stability is like a swamp. Probably, joked Lynette. Shannon understood that Lynette was joking and laughed at her words. Auntie, what are you talking about? Derek knows the way to his office and back, and he doesn't deviate from it. Everything is fine with us. I'm very glad that I have my own swamp because it's so warm and cozy. Well, that's good, smiled Lynette. I saw Derek last time. He's gained weight. Shannon, you're feeding him well. And the girls have grown into beauties. I brought you something, said Shannon. Here, Derek's parents came from the village and brought something. How are they doing, Auntie? They're doing well. That's nice. Lynette smiled. They used to be against your marriage to Derek, but now they're happy and proud of their granddaughters. Yeah, that's true, sighed Shannon. And I'll never stop thanking you for my happiness. It was you who once found Derek, told him everything, explained it all to him. We almost broke each other's destinies, didn't we? Why bring that up now? Lynette sighed. What's done is done. The main thing is that everything is fine with you. Shannon looked around the room and only now noticed that something was off. I didn't get it. Are you planning to go somewhere? She asked in surprise, pointing to the open closets and nightstands. Yeah, nodded Lynette. I want to go on vacation. For how long? Anne shrugged in response. I don't know, Shannon. Can't say. Maybe for a while. And I'll leave you my keys, just in case. Auntie, let us drive you to the station. When are you leaving? I'll call Derek right now. Don't worry, my dear. I'll get there myself. Well, okay, agreed Shannon. Just please promise me you'll call me. Okay, I promise. nodded Lynette, and when the door closed behind her niece, she sank heavily onto the nearby poof. Tears glistened in Lynette's eyes. She quickly wiped them away with her palm and sternly told herself, "Come on, stop it. You've been a fighter all your life." And now, Shannon returned home but was not herself. Something was bothering her, and she couldn't figure out what exactly. Derek noticed his wife's anxiety. "What happened, Shannon? You seem nervous. Don't stay silent. Are you in trouble?" "You know, honey, I was at Aunt Lynette's today, and I didn't like it at all. Something's off about her. She was acting differently. Derek, you understand?" And her face was like... Shannon couldn't explain it, but her agitation grew with each passing minute. "Derek, please, let's go to her. I feel like something's not right here." "Then call her right now if something's bothering you," advised Derek. "I did call before coming home. She's not answering. Please, let's go, or I'll go crazy." Derek shrugged in response. "Well, okay, get dressed. I'll go down to the car." 20 minutes later, Shannon opened the door to Lynette's apartment with her own key and entered the dimly lit room. Auntie, are you home?" she called out, turning on the light in the hallway. Response to Shannon was silence. Then she stepped into the room and immediately screamed, pressing her palm to her lips. Her aunt lay on the couch, unmoving and unresponsive to her sobbing niece's calls. Derek, who had followed his wife into the apartment, instantly understood what had happened. He called an ambulance and then led Shannon to the kitchen. "Please calm down. Don't cry. There's nothing more we can do for Aunt Lynette," he said. All the arrangements for the funeral fell on Derek's shoulders. Shannon was just not herself. Lynette's sister, Jolene, couldn't calm down either. Derek's parents immediately drove back to the village after the farewell and took the grandchildren with them for a couple of weeks. For Shannon, this was the first sorrowful event, and she took it very hard. Of course, she had been a child at her grandparents' funerals long ago, but a child's soul is elastic, and the sad event quickly faded from her memory. But now everything was different, and if it weren't for Derek, Shannon would have been completely lost. And only after 40 days did she decide to come to her aunt's apartment. Shannon took out the keys and froze in front of the childhood familiar metal door. For some reason, she didn't want to enter Aunt Lynette's apartment. Into the empty apartment where her aunt's laughter would no longer be heard, where there would be no smell of her signature apple pie. Shannon spent a lot of time at her aunt's. She worked nearby and often dropped by in the evenings to chat. Lynette loved her niece. She understood how difficult it was for her and the young mother to combine work and caring for the twin daughters. Shannon never left without another pie or some treats for the girls. And now Aunt Lynette was gone. The doctors said she had a weak heart and was surprised that Shannon didn't know about it. But how could she know if Lynette herself never complained about anything? She was always cheerful, full of life. She laughed and was the life of the party at gatherings. "Oh, Auntie," sighed Shannon. "How could this happen?" Shannon mourned her loss deeply. Derek supported her, but sometimes Shannon felt that Lynette was closer to her than her own mother, who stayed in the village after her daughter moved to the city. How Lynette helped Shannon and Derek when they were just starting to live together. They lived together with her for almost 2 years, and not once did they see a displeased expression on her face. She also helped with the newborn babies. Shannon smiled. At that time, Lynette used to say that her apartment reminded her of a train station. People come and go. There were always suitcases, boxes, and the noise of little children in the rooms. Of course, Lynette joked about it. After all, she gladly welcomed Derek's parents when they came to help Shannon with the twins. And Jolene, her sister, visited too. There were other guests as well. Then, when the babies were placed in daycare, and Derek rented separate housing for his family, Lynette spoke to them. "Well, they're gone. And now I have such silence that I can't fall asleep. I got used to the constant noise. Looks like I'll have to invite a rock band over," Lynette joked. Everyone laughed. And now Shannon came to her aunt's apartment. filled with memories. "Oh, Auntie, Auntie," she whispered, touching the couch pillow that still held Lynette's perfume scent. But why did it all turn out this way? Lynette was the more assertive and determined of the two sisters. A simple girl went to the big city right after finishing school. She told everyone she wasn't going to spend her whole life in the village. Lynette wanted more, and she achieved what she dreamed of. She graduated from university, worked as an engineer at a defense plant. But she never got married. Shannon asked her aunt why, as there were always many successful and attractive men around Lynette. Engineers, ordinary workers, programmers. And Lynette herself had a very attractive appearance, especially in her youth. With her stature, beautiful figure, and striking features, she always caught the attention of men. But Lynette never started her own family. "You know, Shannon, being a man in marriage is great. Everything is taken care of. Dinner is prepared. Children are well groomed. But for women, it's an extra burden. What do you do when you come home from work?" "Ha." Lynette chuckled as usual. "Well, I check Natalie and Vanessa's homework. Cook dinner before Derek comes home. Do the laundry," Shannon listed. She already understood where her aunt was leading, and she smiled too. "And me, I put on a refreshing mask, watch my favorite movies, or read," Lynette said, pouring tea into cups. "That's the difference. No, I won't let a man into my territory, demanding service like in the best hotels. No, your mom and I, as you can see, are loners. Well, at least you are not like that. And besides, I won't try to convince you. You're young. You still have strength. But when you get older, you'll understand my words." Shannon never fully understood her aunt's position. She loved Derek, adored her daughters, and couldn't imagine her life without them. But Lynette rightly believed that each person has their own path. Some choose family, while others choose a life of complete enjoyment. Shannon always had fun and easygoing times with Lynette. She shared her problems with her aunt and always received the right advice. She could cry or laugh heartily over failures. But now all of that was in the past. Lynette was gone forever, and all that was left after her was an empty apartment. Shannon suddenly felt like the house was dying along with its owner, turning into an empty box without a soul. And this box was inherited by her. Lynette had no other close relatives. Jolene, Shannon's mother, didn't count. She didn't need the apartment at all because she wouldn't leave her rural home for anything. Jolene didn't fancy the city, which she always considered noisy and uncomfortable. So, for Shannon, this sudden inheritance was unexpected. Her aunt never spoke to her about it. But Derek was genuinely happy when he learned about the will. "We'll sell this apartment later and buy the girls a small ones." He smiled. "Yeah. But still, you know, it would have been better if she had lived longer. I'll miss her a lot." Shannon sighed. "Of course, dear." Derek hugged his wife and kissed her. "But life goes on. Aunt Lynette is gone. But you and I are alive and must make plans for the future. Live for the children. Listen, do you want me to go with you? Because I know you. First you'll cry, then hysteria will start, and you'll drown in tears and your own memories. No, please don't. I just want to be there alone for a while." Shannon wandered around the apartment, touching her aunt's belongings. There was her elegant coat and winter hat with wide brims. She always wore hats in both winter and summer. They suited her so well. Shannon sighed and walked into another room. There was a wardrobe, a sofa bed, and a television taking up almost half of the wall. Lynette loved watching movies and allowed herself the luxury of a huge plasma screen. A magazine with crosswords lay on the coffee table. As if the apartment's owner was about to return, sit in the armchair, and Shannon felt tears welling up in her eyes. No, she mustn't. She needed to hold herself together. After all, Shannon was an adult woman. She shouldn't allow herself to fall apart. Photographs hung on the wall. A young Lynette stood next to a very attractive man in military uniform. And there was Shannon herself on the day she was discharged from the maternity ward, holding 2 bundles tied with pink ribbons. And here were Shannon's daughters, Natalie and Vanessa, on their first day of school. Shannon sank into her aunt's favorite armchair and pondered. The task ahead was not easy. She had to sort through Lynette's things, decide what to keep for herself, and what to give away or throw away. Shannon sat for a little longer, inhaling the familiar scent of her aunt's apartment, and then got up and got to work. She started with the wardrobe. Lynette loved to dress stylishly. Sometimes her outfits seemed a bit eccentric, but she always looked magnificent. Shannon sorted the clothes into piles: what to throw away, what to keep, what to donate to charity. She sorted through the items almost until evening, and practically every outfit brought back memories and tears. But she managed. The wardrobe was empty. There was only one shoebox left, standing in the corner. Shannon expected to find another pair of fashionable high-heeled shoes in there, but to her surprise, she discovered that the box contained papers, envelopes, bills, old cards. At first, Shannon was going to throw them away, but then she changed her mind. What if there was something important or memorable in there? She glanced at the clock. It was almost 6, and she still had to drive home and help the girls with their math homework. And dinner wouldn't cook itself. Shannon squeezed the box of documents into her bulky bag and got ready to head home. At home, Shannon was greeted by the usual, familiar, and dear chaos that filled her heart. Her daughters had managed to argue and were waiting for Mom to resolve their conflict. They always found reasons to argue, always had trouble sharing since childhood. And now, as they were finishing school, they became even more uncontrollable. "Derek, could you please talk to them at some point? They are driving me crazy," Shannon said to him. "No, dear, you deal with them yourself. If they were boys, I'd intervene. But how do you punish girls? They both have such pleading eyes and flutter their eyelashes. I forget everything immediately." "So sorry, Shannon," Derek replied. "Yes, they take advantage of that." The woman sighed, and now, as soon as she opened the door, she heard Natalie's irritated voice. "See, I'll be the first one to get married. Mark my words. To Gary." "No, you won't," Vanessa shouted back. "I'll marry Gary." "Girls, I'm home." Shannon entered the children's room. The sisters sat on their beds facing each other, arms crossed over their chests. Their eyes were filled with indignation. "What's going on with you two?" Shannon asked gently. "Natalie says she'll marry Gary and do it before me." Vanessa pouted. "Mom, if she was born first, why does she get to do everything first? Girls, why does it matter? It's not a competition." Shannon smiled. "It doesn't matter when or who gets married first. The main thing is to find a good person who will love and respect you." "But does Dad respect you?" Natalie asked teasingly. "Well, of course." Shannon sat next to her daughter and gently patted her head. "Your dad is the best in the world. What are you talking about? I can always rely on him for anything. But I'll still get married first," Natalie declared. "Well, we'll see how it goes," Shannon sighed. "There's no need to rush. Love is unpredictable. You never know when it will come." Shannon kissed her daughter on the forehead. "Okay, I'm going to cook dinner now. Dad will be home soon. And you two should think about exams instead of quarreling over grooms." Changing into her favorite robe, Shannon headed to the kitchen. She had dinner to prepare. She enjoyed thinking about familiar household chores, engaging in long conversations with herself about life, her daughters, and her own destiny, which, as she felt, was unfolding quite successfully. Home, husband, daughters, work. What more could she want? In the morning, Shannon woke up earlier than usual and was surprised not to find Derek next to her. She walked into the kitchen and found him sitting with a cup of cold coffee in his hands. "Derek?" Shannon asked, surprised. "Is something wrong?" "No, everything's fine. I just couldn't sleep." "Why didn't you tell me? I have a good sleeping pill." You would have slept like a baby after it. No, Shannon, I don't want to. He shook his head. Okay, sorry. I'll go get ready for work. For work? She exclaimed, surprised. But it's still early. I have a headache. The man replied. I want to take a work before the day starts. You seem really off. Shannon worried. I don't even like myself. He chuckled. Just 10 minutes later, the door closed behind her husband. Alarm crept into Shannon's heart, but she tried to cope with it and began preparing breakfast for her beloved daughters. In a month, they would turn 18, so it was time to think about how to celebrate this milestone. Initially, Shannon wanted to consult with her daughters, but then she decided it would be better if they and Derek prepared a surprise for the girls. So, she didn't bring up the topic during breakfast. Natalie scowled, while Vanessa remained calm and friendly as usual. Vanessa washed the dishes, thanked her mom for the delicious breakfast, and went to her room to change. Meanwhile, Natalie shot angry glances at her sister but didn't respond when her mother asked about her mood. I'll be out late tonight, Mom, Natalie warned. I want to go to the movies with a friend. Yes, sweetheart, I'll also be late, Shannon said. I have an inventory, so I'll be held up. I hope you'll find something to eat in the fridge. Have dinner and feed your dad too. Natalie didn't reply, but Vanessa, as always, smiled sweetly at her mother and nodded. On her way to work, Shannon thought about how Vanessa's personality resembled her Aunt Lynette's. Natalie, on the other hand, was like Shannon's own mother, Jolene. Shannon smiled at her thoughts, but as soon as she arrived at the store where she worked as a senior saleswoman, she forgot about everything and immersed herself in the reports. In the evening, utterly exhausted and with an unbearable headache, she returned home and heard her daughter screaming as soon as she stepped through the door. Oh my God, what's happened? Shannon asked, pressing her hands to her temples. Mom. Natalie, red-eyed from crying, rushed to her. She stole Gary from me. Who? Shannon still didn't understand. Your favorite Vanessa. She was with him, you know. I came and found them here. But he's mine. Mine. I've always loved him. Vanessa. Shannon turned to her other daughter. Can you explain anything to me? I can. Vanessa nodded. Her face was covered in red blotches, and she spoke with a trembling voice, full of excitement. Natalie was always chasing Gary. But he loves me, not her. I love him too. And we're going to have a baby. Vanessa's last words came out as if forced, and understanding their meaning, Shannon collapsed onto the couch, powerless. Oh, my God. What curse is hanging over us? Vanessa. How could you? She exclaimed. You're still asking? Mom. Natalie hysterically cried. She deliberately got pregnant so he wouldn't leave her. I wanted everything to be fair. Okay, stop. Where's the father? Shannon asked. Just as his footsteps echoed in the hallway, she went to meet her husband, Derek. Hi. Come on. We need to talk. You've come at the right time, she said. To everyone's surprise, Derek reacted calmly to the news. But he's not refusing to marry you. He asked Vanessa. No. And how old is he? 20, 21. Okay. Then, here's the deal. We'll give you and Gary Aunt Lynette's apartment if everything goes smoothly with you two. With the wedding, of course. I hope nobody is against it. Shannon shook her head. I'm not against it. Vanessa smiled, while Natalie jumped up. What? Just like that? She gets Gary, the apartment, everything. Just because she knows how to spread her legs at the right time. Dad, you can't be serious, can you? Natalie exclaimed. Natalie, calm down. It's better this way, Derek said. Fairer, better. Are you and Mom always honest with each other? Huh? Natalie retorted. Derek sat up, his face going pale. What are you talking about? Natalie flared up. The truth that you love so much. Mom. Natalie turned to her mother with fiery eyes. I saw Dad with a young woman and a baby. They looked like a family. You know what I mean. Stop it. Derek raised his voice at his daughter for the first time. What nonsense are you making up? Yes, I saw it. You were holding her by the waist and helping push the stroller, Natalie continued. Isn't it nice to live with two families? Dad, Shannon looked helplessly at her husband, who, seeming to lose control of himself, suddenly shouted, "Shut up right now, you little wretch." Shannon gasped and rushed to her husband. Derek, what's gotten into you? Natalie stormed out of the room, choking back sobs. She returned a minute later with a bag in her hands. I hate you. I hate all of you. And don't look for me. I'll never come back here. And I won't forgive any of you. The front door slammed shut. Vanessa, startled, quickly turned and went into her room, locking the door behind her. Shannon still sat there, looking at her husband. Derek, is this really true? She whispered. You've been lying to me all this time. I'm sorry. I don't even know how this happened. But you don't have to hold on to me. Shannon, I really want to leave, Derek confessed. I have another woman. But what about our daughters? What about me? Shannon felt like she was suffocating. Natalie left. Look, Vanessa is crying in her room. What about us? Derek, what are you doing? Why now? And in such a moment, a heavy, dark suffocation began to rise in her throat. It's hard to explain. I understand, Shannon. But that's how it happened. And it's my decision, Derek said. But, wait, Derek, did you really think we'd peacefully live until old age, and one of us would cry heavily at the other's grave? Shannon, don't idolize the family. Don't think about its inviolability, its strength. Life can change at any moment. That's what happened to us. He left the room. Shannon followed and saw her husband packing his things. Derek, she pleaded. Think again. We've lived together for so many years. We have so much in common. Can you really just destroy everything like this? Derek, please, you're my husband. I've always loved you. Don't you believe me? He stepped towards her as if he wanted to say something, but then changed his mind, worked out, and quietly closed the door behind him. The woman's legs gave way, and she, struck by new sorrow, fell to the floor, shaking with sobs. Neither Derek nor Natalie returned home. Shannon now lived with Vanessa and only asked her one thing: not to leave her alone right now. But about a month later, Vanessa came and told Shannon the news. Here, Mom, we got married with Gary. We decided we don't need a wedding. Mom, please tell me, can we really move into Aunt Lynette's apartment? Just make sure everything's legal, so Gary and I can be at peace. If possible, that is. Okay. Shannon nodded. Congratulations, sweetheart. Be happy. The family didn't work out. It turns out, all this time Derek lived with Shannon but loved another. And she had known, felt it for a long time. A woman always knows when her husband has another. Their marriage was unsuccessful, long unnecessary, and hadn't brought joy to anyone lately. But Shannon tried to push away such thoughts. The pain of a failed life pressed down on Shannon. There were no tears, just a terrible ache in her chest, as if there was a hole there. Derek came a week later. Shannon flinched at his knock, quickly glanced at her husband, sensing a certain accent in his words. Could you let me in? This is my home too. Even more so. If you remember, of course. Shannon felt uncomfortable, as if a stranger had come into the house to remind her of an old debt and reproach her quietly. As if to say, you forgot, but I remember perfectly well. I find it difficult to tell you this, Shannon, but right after the divorce, I want to move in here with Clover and our son. Wait, what about me? Shannon asked. Well, you haven't forgotten that my parents bought this apartment for us and arranged it so that it would stay with me after the divorce. Legally, you have no rights to it. You don't have to continue, Shannon said. Then she covered her face with her hands, not letting the impending hysteria break out. So, divorce between us is inevitable. Well, at least I'm not to blame for that. Don't look at me like that. I won't try to prove anything to you. Live here, please. Just give me a few days, and I'll leave. Would you like me to help you find an apartment? He asked her. Thank you, but I think I manage. Without you, Shannon replied. Shannon sighed, as if shaking off her stupor. Derek remained a mystery to her. Close, yet at the same time so distant. Someone she could never quite figure out. So, by the time I turned 40, I was left with nothing I had. Now I have no home, no family, no one. Vanessa is perfectly happy with her husband. I don't want to intrude on them. Of course, I never managed to find Natalie. She called a couple of times, said she was fine. At least I heard her voice. But where is she? What's happening with her? I don't know. She doesn't say anything. And your mom? Jacob asked. Mom? Shannon sadly smiled. You know, Jacob. She got married. Aiden moved to our village a few years ago, and Mom lost her head as soon as she saw him. And he fell in love with her too. That's how it goes. They're both older, but happy like children. They go for walks, watch TV shows together, bake pies. I called her, wanted to ask her to let me come over, but I didn't get a chance. She interrupted me and started the conversation herself. She told me she found a worthy man and wants to grow old with him. How can I interfere with that? So, where are you living now? Jacob asked, looking thoughtfully into the distance. I rented an apartment. Small, old. The neighbors make noise every day. But those are all little things. But now I live close to work. What else do I need alone? Shannon paused. Jacob, tell me about yourself. I don't know anything about you. About you and Aunt Lynette. I loved her. Shannon madly loved her. And she loved me too. Until she found out I was married. You see, I got married early, had children early. Peggy, my wife, is a good woman. She traveled with me on assignments, endured everything. And I never cheated on her until I met Lynette. That's when I lost my mind. And she responded to me. My God, what a love we had. The kind they write about in books. Then Lynette found out I was married. About the kids. And you know, she didn't cause scenes, didn't cry, didn't demand that I divorce. She just walked away from me, that's all. For 3 years, I tried to get everything back, even wanted to divorce for her sake. But Lynette didn't allow it. I love you, Jacob. She told me then, you'll always be my only man. I won't let anyone else in. I just don't need anyone else. But we can't be together because you have a family and children. If you divorce or tell them about us, I'll never forgive you for it. And if you stay in the family, I'll be your friend until the end of days. A friend, you understand. I'll always be glad to see you. My home will always be open to you anytime. But our friendship will be pure, told Jacob to Shannon. Well, I understood everything and agreed, Jacob said. That day, we felt like we belonged to each other for the last time, as if saying goodbye. We still saw each other, of course. I really did visit her, but she never allowed any intimacy again. Just kissed me goodbye. And even without that, it warmed my heart, you know, when she was around. You see, there are relationships where you are just happy knowing that this person exists in the world, and you can hear their voice, see them, hold their hand. That's what your Aunt Lynette was to me. She was like oxygen to me. Lynette was an amazing woman. She managed to keep our secret and my honor. Last year, my wife Peggy passed away. She never suspected that I had someone else besides her. And my children don't know about it. They live abroad now, rarely visit. And Lynette is my secret. And the love of my life. We'll meet again soon. I thought the same about myself, Shannon admitted. I lost everything I had. Jacob gave her a stern look. Don't even think about it. You're still too young to look back. Your life isn't over yet. Shannon was silent. She thought about the strange and yet so trusting conversation. She didn't easily connect with people. However, Jacob seemed so familiar and spiritually close to her at that moment. Someone she wanted to listen to and hear. As long as a person is alive, everything can be resolved. You can talk, forgive, understand, and most importantly, tell them about it. But when that person is gone, oh, Shannon, then it's too late. You understand what I mean? Jacob spoke. Your husband left you for someone else. Well, let him. Yes, it's hurtful. But it's not the end of the world. Your daughters have grown up. But it was all leading to this. Children grow up. Understand. Everyone does it their way. But it's right. So why do you dwell on all this? Try to start living for yourself, for myself. Shannon was surprised. I don't know how to do that. I've never lived like that. I don't know how. You have to learn, girl. You have to learn, and everything will be fine for you. Each of us chooses our own destiny. You, your husband, your daughters, everyone has their own path. Yes, you were a family. Live together. Be grateful to them for that time. But don't force people to stay with you against their will. If you're important to them, they'll come back to you, wherever they are. And if you're not needed, why torture yourself? You'll definitely be lucky. You'll be happy, girl. Returning home, Shannon thought about her daughter Natalie. Remembering their last conversation, Natalie, stop doing foolish things. Everything will be different. I beg you, come back. Where? Mom? To Dad and his new wife? Or maybe to Vanessa and her Gary? Huh? Or to your little apartment with the shabby walls? No, Mom, I won't come back. And please don't worry. I'm fine, Natalie replied. Natalie, honey, come to your senses. You have a family. We love you very much. Forget about this Gary. You're beautiful, smart. You'll definitely be lucky in your personal life. Why do you take everything so close to heart? That's it, Mom. Natalie felt that she could be persuaded now and hurried to interrupt the conversation. I'm already an adult. I'm of legal age. And, Mom, I can make independent decisions. Don't look for me. I'm fine. I'll call you sometime. The girl pushed the off button and turned to Seaton, who was sleeping next to her. A warm feeling of gratitude stirred in her soul. She remembered that evening when, after an argument with her parents, she walked down the street in tears. Suddenly, a car pulled up beside her. Isn't it too late for walks, beauty? A mocking voice sounded. Natalie stopped and looked at the stranger. What do you want? She sniffled. Are you going somewhere? Then go ahead. You're quite prickly. The guy smiled and got out of the car. Don't be afraid of me. I'm Seaton. What's your name? I'm Natalie. The girl replied and sighed. So, Natalie, is everything really that bad? She burst into tears. And suddenly, for some reason, deciding to confide in this stranger, she spilled out everything that had happened to her. I'm not needed by anyone in this life, you know. Everyone couldn't care less about me. My mom and dad love my sister more because she's beautiful and obedient. And I'm not like that. And I can't stand it when decisions are made for me. So I left home, and I'm not going back. I understand, nodded Seaton. So now you have nowhere to live. But I can help you. If you want, I do. The girl agreed. She felt that he took her seriously, sympathized with her problems, and, most importantly, he didn't laugh at her, didn't lecture her. Seaton simply decided to help, and that was it. Get in the car. Seaton opened the door and helped the girl, and when she was in the car, he got behind the wheel and started driving. Natalie, you're desperate. You agree to go somewhere with a stranger, and that's dangerous. Aren't you afraid? What if I'm some kind of maniac? You know, I don't care anymore, the girl said, bitterly smiling. Though you don't seem like a maniac. All right. Don't worry. Seaton nodded. And thank you for trusting me. I'll take you to a country house of my friend. He and his family went abroad, and they'll be back in 3 months. I got the keys from him. I wanted to live there myself, but I'll share the house with you on mutually beneficial terms. Can you cook? Can you clean? I can do everything. And I cook quite deliciously. By the way, Vanessa, my sister, preferred cleaning, but I'm good at cooking. I can bake pies. Our whole family loves pies. Well, that's great. I wouldn't mind a pie, by the way. And I don't need anything else from you. They didn't drive for long. The house was located in the suburbs. Natalie imagined this house as small, like a cabin. But no. It was a 2-story house with towers, resembling a palace, with a beautiful path from the gate to the porch, with a high, sturdy fence, a well-kept territory with lawns. Natalie smiled bewilderedly. She had only seen such houses on magazine pages and TV shows. How do people even live here? Natalie walked through the small living room. A white sofa with plush leather, a stone shelf of a beautiful terracotta color, a carpet on the floor. For almost a month, they lived just as friends. Natalie cooked, cleaned, and Seaton brought groceries and, if needed, helped the girl. They strolled around the neighborhood, sometimes went to the city, watched TV at home, and she was very grateful that she once met Seaton. But somehow, during lunch, he noticed Natalie's sad look. What's wrong, dear? Seaton wondered. You know, today is my birthday. I'm turning 19. And I have, you know, no mom, no dad, no sister. We always celebrated holidays as a family. And now you are celebrating it with me. And Seaton gently hugged the girl. All right, get ready. We're going to the club. Have you ever been to Laguna? No, I've never been to such places at all. And I don't know how to behave there. Just relax and enjoy. It's your holiday. Nothing complicated. Seaton laughed. I'll teach you. Let's go. I don't even have suitable clothes. Look at me. Jeans and a sweater. Elegant look, isn't it? You look beautiful even in this sweater and jeans. Seaton smiled. But this outfit is definitely not suitable for our celebration. You're right. So here's what we'll do. We'll stop by the store now, get you something, and then straight to the club. Natalie laughed. Seaton was the prince she had dreamed of, like every girl. It was the most delightful evening in Natalie's adult life. And when they returned home, Natalie and Seaton found themselves in the same bed. The fairy tale continues. He smiled and leaned in to kiss her. The girl responded to his kiss. Happy birthday, my beautiful lady, Seaton whispered, and Natalie's head spun with happiness. 3 months flew by for them like a single day. One evening, Seaton sat down next to Natalie on the couch and hugged her. Darling, I hate to say this, but we need to leave. What do you mean? The girl didn't understand. Do we have to leave here? It's a shame. It's so wonderful here. Wait, did you forget? We're just guests here. The owners of the house are returning on Wednesday, which means we need to tidy up perfectly and quietly leave as if we were never here. I didn't inform my friend that I would be here with you. I mean, Seaton. Natalie was upset. Where will I go? Well, I don't know. We can stay at my place for a couple of days. My dad's on a business trip. My mom went to visit her sister. And then we'll figure something out. Natalie laid her head on his shoulder. I feel so calm with you. And so good. Just don't leave me. I really don't know what to do and where to go. I'm not going to leave you. Let's just discuss everything later. For now, let's start tidying up here. They did everything as Seaton said. And soon they moved to his place. You have a nice apartment, said Natalie. Listen. Can I make a call from your phone? Sure. While he brewed tea in the kitchen, she called her mother, letting her know that everything was fine. But when Shannon suggested her daughter come back, Natalie just laughed. Where to, Mom? To Dad and his new wife? Or maybe to Vanessa and her Gary? Huh? Or to your little apartment with the shabby walls? No, Mom, I'm not coming back. And I haven't forgiven you yet. In the morning, Seaton and Natalie were still asleep when they heard a loud female voice above them. Seaton, honey, who is this? The lovers instantly woke up, seeing Seaton's mother, Mrs. Nelson, in front of them. Behind her stood his father. The man hugged his wife and said, "Let's go, dear. Let them get dressed. And you, son, escort your friend and come back to us for a serious talk. Hopefully, it won't take you long." Natalie, frightened, couldn't take her eyes off Seaton. "Wait for me at the cafe across the street," he said, handing her a few bills. "I'll come soon." But Seaton only arrived an hour later, looking puzzled. "Well, what?" Natalie impatiently asked him. "Why are you silent?" "I'm nervous." "Oh, Seaton, I'm so ashamed. If I had known they would return, I would never have agreed to stay overnight with you. I have two pieces of news, good and bad." The guy began, avoiding her gaze. "I told Dad that you had nowhere to live, and then he offered to pay for a room for you. See, everything is fast, simple, and easy. Now you have a room, and you'll live there. I'll take you there now. Do you want?" "Seaton, don't worry. It's time for me to move into the dormitory. I got a room from the university. Arranged it at the dean's office." Seaton stared at the table, and Natalie immediately fell down. "Seaton, do you want us to break up?" The girl's lips trembled. No, dear, of course not." "Seaton, tell me honestly, do you love me?" "Yes, I love you very much, and I love you too." She hugged him. Natalie understood that she was behaving foolishly. Seaton couldn't transform from an immature boy into someone else, someone strong, making his own decisions. But she desperately wanted everything to be just like that, probably out of desperation. But desperation is not the best feeling. Tears come after desperation. Seaton looked at her guiltily. Natalie's heart sank, but she smiled at him and said, "Come on, Seaton, it's all right. We'll still meet in the city. Go to cafes, movies, walk." Yes, of course, we will." Natalie moved into a room with two girls from her course. The usual student routine began. In early October, she began to feel unwell. Sandy, her roommate, was the first to suspect something strange. "Come on, Natalie, spill the beans. Was there something with your Seaton?" "There was." The girl sighed. "I never thought it could happen so quickly." "She never fought," Sandy muttered. "But you should have fought. And now what? Are you going to have an abortion?" "Sandy, it's scary." "Well then, urgently marry your Seaton and tell him everything as it is." "When are you seeing him?" "I don't know. We haven't discussed it yet." "Then call him. Say you need to meet urgently." Natalie couldn't understand anything. Remorse weighed heavily on her while she faced the horror of her situation. What had she done? Seaton responded immediately. Hearing her voice, he asked anxiously, "What's wrong?" "Seaton, I need to talk to you. It's very urgent." "Okay," the guy said calmly. The night before their meeting, Natalie hardly slept. She was thinking about how to tell Seaton about her pregnancy without making it seem like she was forcing him to marry her. Seaton listened carefully to the news, silently. He pondered for a moment, then smiled and said, "Well, Natalie, I guess we'll have to get married." Although marriage wasn't in my plans, but Natalie wasn't listening anymore. She heard only what she wanted to hear. Seaton would become her husband. They would be a family. But as they say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. The week passed in torturous anticipation. When Natalie dialed Seaton's number, his phone was unavailable. Finally, after persistent ringing, it wasn't Seaton who answered, but his mother, Mrs. Nelson. "Seaton's not home. He won't be here tomorrow or ever again. Forget this number forever." "Young lady." Natalie stood with the phone in her hand for a long time, staring into the gray sky. The city was experiencing the last warm rains of autumn. Seaton came the next evening. Seaton sat heavily on a chair, sighed, and said, "Natalie, I'm leaving for Denmark. My father's brother lives there. He has his own business. My parents want me to get some practical experience. What about me, Seaton? And the baby? Have you thought about us? Yes. I think it's best for you to pretend like nothing happened. So you're suggesting I have an abortion? I can't. I'm scared. Believe me, it's not easy for me either. Please, don't cry, Natalie. Seaton cautiously touched her shoulder, then quickly withdrew his hand. Natalie looked past him with an empty, detached gaze. Go away, Natalie. I'll call you. Okay. I'm leaving. The door closed behind him, and something happened to her. Natalie's consciousness drifted away somewhere. She just wanted to sleep. To sleep a lot. And nothing else. That's it, Natalie. Enough suffering. Tomorrow we're going to the hospital, Sandy said, returning from class. Yes, I understand everything. We need to go. But I'm very scared. As if I've committed some crime, Natalie replied. I'll go with you. Don't worry. I've already made an appointment for you. And for now, rest. Don't think about anything. The morning brought no relief. Natalie's face was swollen from tears. She froze outside the doctor's office, shifting nervously from foot to foot. When she entered the room, a stern-looking doctor peered over her glasses and said, "Undress behind the screen. It's your first time, isn't it?" Natalie nodded affirmatively. "Don't be afraid. Come on, I think I might be pregnant. Let's have a look at you now." Then she wrote something for a long time. Natalie sat in a daze. "I'll write you a referral for tests. You've come too late. The abortion deadline has passed. The boy promised to marry you, right?" "He did," Natalie said. "You'll have to give birth, dear. Nothing can be done. Don't cry. Instead, think about the baby. Go on, go, dear." Month after month passed, but there was no news from Seaton. Feeling contractions, Natalie called a taxi and asked to be taken to the maternity hospital. She gave birth prematurely. She remained in the hospital for a long time. She only informed her fellow classmates' friends about the birth of her daughter. "Maybe you should tell your mom. She asked about you," her friend Sandy said. "I don't want to. I'll figure things out in my life on my own." "Okay, well, as you wish. But if I were you..." Sandy stopped short, seeing Natalie's stern gaze. "You're still foolish. When will they discharge you?" "In a week." "All right. Call me, and we'll meet you with the girls." Natalie didn't notify anyone about her discharge. She left the maternity hospital with her tiny daughter in her arms. But she wasn't allowed back into the dormitory where she lived. "You can't stay here," they told her. "What kind of example are you setting for the other students? Don't even try to convince me. I won't let you in." "But can't you make an exception for a few days?" "I have nowhere to go." "But those aren't my problems, dear. I don't have the authority," the woman concluded. "Go to your parents." And Natalie walked out onto the street, wrapping her baby in a warm blanket. Her daughter whimpered. Soon she would cry. "Hold on, Ella. Hold on, my girl. We're going to Grandpa and Grandma's now. They'll be happy to see you, you'll see." She remembered Seaton's address, finding the house without difficulty. Mrs. Nelson opened the door. At that moment, Ella cried loudly. "Quiet the child down," Seaton's mother said irritably. "And what do you want? My son isn't home, and won't be. There's no place for you here." Natalie stood frozen in place, unable to utter a word. "Why are you standing there? You want to upset me, trying to latch onto a boy from a good family. It won't work. Besides, Seaton is getting married soon. He has no time for you." Mrs. Nelson slammed the door. The baby, apparently sensing her mother's humiliation, cried even harder. Natalie sat straight on the cold concrete steps, unzipped her jacket, took out her swollen breast, and began to feed the baby. Then she wandered the quiet spring streets with her daughter for a long time. Exhausted, she sat down on a bench in the park. There she sat, staring blankly ahead. Then it started to rain. Cold drops ran down her face and hair. She didn't even have the strength to move. Ella woke up and cried. Natalie mechanically rocked her and felt her eyes closing. She would fall asleep here, in the street, in the rain, any moment now. Why are you sitting here in the rain? A passerby called out. Your child will freeze. What? Natalie turned her head and saw a man in his 30s standing before her. He was in a tracksuit, clearly returning from a jog. I'm asking why you're not going home. It's starting to rain. Are you okay? I have nowhere to go. And at that moment, a downpour hit them. Without hesitation, the man took the baby from Natalie. Come with me. Get up, he said to her. I'm Chad. I live in this building. Natalie stood up and followed him, not saying a word. Come in, the man said, letting Natalie into the apartment. Let's find something to wrap the baby in. And don't worry, I live alone. No one will harm you here. Within 5 minutes, wrapping Ella in a clean dry sheet, Natalie fed her daughter and put her to sleep. Changing into Chad's robe, she went to the kitchen. Then they sat for a long time, drinking tea and eating sandwiches. We haven't even been properly introduced. The man began. My name is Natalie, and my daughter is Ella. Pleasure to meet you, Natalie. Likewise. Don't worry, I'll warm up and leave. Where will you go? Chad raised an eyebrow. It's almost night. Natalie silently pushed her empty cup away. Stay with me, Natalie. I can see you're not a fraud. You're in trouble. So stay as long as you need. Chad made a call, and half an hour later, a package of diapers, a water bottle, and some baby clothes were delivered. He handed the package to Natalie. Here, this is for you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chad. She thanked him. That night, for the first time in a long time, she slept peacefully under the protection of this wonderful man, Chad. In the morning, when she woke up, breakfast was already on the table, and the embarrassed girl smiled at her hospitable host. And you, Chad, have you already had breakfast? I always eat on the go. I don't really have any groceries, but there's bread, sausage, cheese, and butter. Would you allow me to cook lunch for you? Asked Natalie. Of course, but I'll be back late. I don't come home early. I stay late at work. And what do you do for work? If it's not a secret, I work at one of the research institutes. I've been in science for many years. It's very interesting, but it has its consequences. Over time, single scientists turn into boring bookworms. Natalie laughed. I don't think that's going to happen to you. You're very attractive and kind. Chad suddenly looked embarrassed, and Natalie noticed it. Chad, she said to him, I'll try to solve my problem somehow, and I'll definitely thank you for your help. We won't bother you for long with Ella. It's all good. Waved Chad. Live here, please. I often go on business trips. I'm leaving again in 2 weeks, but you should look for an apartment. Well, if you don't mind, of course. And Natalie gratefully smiled at him. But can you trust your apartment to a stranger? She asked. But can you do anything wrong? He asked in the same tone as Natalie. No, of course not, the girl said, and Chad laughed. You see, then you can be trusted. Besides, we already know each other. Natalie and Chad quickly found common ground, and within a few months, they couldn't imagine life without each other. And when he proposed to her, Natalie, of course, agreed. Chad adopted Ella and gave her his last name. The girl grew up unaware that her stepfather was raising her, not her biological father. Happy birthday, honey. Natalie kissed Ella on the cheek as she entered her room in the morning. Thanks, Mom. The girl looked at her mother suspiciously. A strange premonition troubled her from the morning, but everything seemed normal, and her birthday fell on a Saturday. Ella turned 15. She had been eagerly awaiting presents since morning, and her father did not disappoint her. Wonderful golden earrings and a magnificent bracelet delighted the girl. Mom, what will you give me? she asked Natalie. Natalie smiled at her daughter. Ella, we're going to the mall, and you'll choose whatever you want. Well, that's awesome. When are we doing this? Well, I think we'll do it right now, Natalie said with a smile. Awesome. Well, then I'm going to get dressed. Natalie and Ella wandered through their favorite shops for a long time, then decided to check out a couple of new ones. In one of them, the owner, already an older woman, came out to meet them, smiling warmly. I'm glad to see you, she began, then suddenly paused, looking intently at Natalie's face, and then at her daughter's. Natalie, my Natalie. The woman reached out to the astonished Natalie. Sweetie, Mom, Natalie murmured. Mom, you're here. It was Shannon. She had aged over the years, but still looked good for her age. She rushed to hug her newly found daughter, while Ella stood there, looking stunned. Natalie, is this your daughter? Shannon asked. Natalie nodded. Ella, meet your grandmother, my mom. Shannon, how? Mom, but you said you had no one. No one at all. Ella was surprised. Natalie, Shannon recoiled. But why? I've been looking for you for so long. Your phone was silent. Your sister Vanessa was looking for you, and your dad too. We went to the police, Natalie. So many years have passed, and you never even thought about us once. Mom, please don't start, Natalie said. I don't want to dwell on the past. Natalie, are you married? Yes. Mom, Chad is a wonderful person. And now, excuse us, it's time for us to go. Wait, daughter, please leave me your phone number. Ella, you too. Today is my birthday, Ella said, and Shannon clapped her hands. Forgive me, I'm completely lost. Let's pick out some clothes for you. It will be my gift to you, my granddaughter. You're so beautiful. Is this your boutique? Natalie asked her mother. Where did you get it? Mom, you see, after the divorce from your dad, I met a very kind man. He was already elderly. His name was Jacob Benson. He helped me get back on my feet. I took care of him for a long time when he was ill. And then it turned out that he left me the apartment and some of his savings in his will. So now I live like this. Vanessa and Gary moved abroad. They have 2 sons and both are very successful. Your dad also has a grown-up son. Do you still communicate with Dad? Natalie was surprised. Well, yes. So many years have passed. You are amazing people. Natalie couldn't help but smile. And I'm not like that. Apparently, I can't forgive. And I carry all the grudges within me. Shannon didn't respond to that. She just sighed, and then asked, Daughter, let's meet on the weekend. Let's all get together. You'll introduce me to your husband. I'll get to know him and my granddaughter better. Mom, no need. Let's leave everything as it is. Ella, have you chosen your things? Well then, let's go. Let's not keep Grandma waiting. She has too much to do. Shannon hugged Ella tightly, holding her close, and whispered goodbye. Come to me, granddaughter. Now you know where to find me. Ella told her father about the strange encounter. And Chad said to Natalie, I don't understand what kind of person you are. Your mother, father, you have a real family. Ella says your mom is very kind, but you don't want to communicate with them. Explain why. When we first met, you said you were an orphan, Natalie. Who jokes about such things? I wasn't joking. I had a falling out with them and didn't tell you about it. Yes, I don't want to talk to any of them. They have their own lives, and I have mine. Our cousin grandmother left us the apartment. Our parents gave it to my sister Vanessa. And you know why? Because she stole my boyfriend and married him herself. Is he Ella's father? Chad asked quietly. No, he's not, Natalie replied. But it doesn't matter, darling. Let's not talk about it. Forget it, please. Forget everything. Wait. But you can't just stop talking to your mother now. And I also want to meet her. Okay, we'll visit her sometime. Are you satisfied? But only her. And that's it. Natalie didn't bother to explain anything further. But the next day, an event occurred that once again threw her off balance. Someone knocked on the door. Chad was home and greeted the guests himself, surprised to see an older couple standing before him. "Excuse us," the gray-haired man said. "We would like to speak with Natalie." "Does she live here?" Natalie instantly recognized that voice and immediately came out of the kitchen. "Mr. and Mrs. Nelson, how did you find me?" she said. "Oh, it wasn't easy," the man said. "Natalie, you had a daughter with Seaton, right? We would like to see our granddaughter." Natalie froze in place. "Perhaps remind you of how you treated me back then when I needed your help," she finally said. "Why have you come here now? It's too late. Seaton will give you another granddaughter or grandson. Seaton is no longer with us. He was very ill, and we couldn't save him. He's been gone for 5 years, and we have no one left in this world. Please forgive us. We were wrong, and now we deeply regret it. Oh, if only we could turn back time. We feel so awful and ashamed, believe me." "Oh my God," Natalie erupted. "And you, Mrs. Nelson, have you forgotten how you advised me to forget the way to your house? Forget about Seaton. Never bother you again. Leave, and the sooner you do it, the better. I've said everything to you." Chad, who had been standing nearby the whole time, was horrified by his wife's words. He took her hand. "Natalie, you have no right to speak to these people like this. Ella is their granddaughter, and as I understand it, their only relative. Allow them to meet." "I said no," Natalie exclaimed and slammed the door shut in front of the uninvited guests. "Natalie, why did you do that to them?" Chad asked, bewildered. "What do you want from me? They once rejected Ella and me, and now I'm supposed to run into their arms." "No, but Ella is their granddaughter. You know what, my dear? You should have had your own child and then decided who should see them and who shouldn't. Ella is my daughter, and only I have the right to make decisions concerning her fate. I asked you to have a child with me, but you didn't want to." Chad paled. "Yes, Chad, and you know why? Because the worst thing that can happen is having a sibling. They take away half of what belongs to you. You don't know that, but I do." Mama, Ella, who had been standing in the doorway, heard everything and now couldn't take her eyes off her father and mother. "Dad, am I not your daughter, my girl?" Chad stepped towards her, but she retreated into the room, shouting, and then locked herself in and didn't let anyone in for a long time. Finally, Natalie managed to persuade her daughter to open the door. Tearful Ella appeared on the threshold again. "Mom, I want to see my real father's family. I want to meet them. And you? Why did you lie for so many years?" Natalie sighed. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I thought it would be better this way." From that very day, happiness seemed to have departed from Chad and Natalie's home. Ella spent a lot of time at her grandmother Shannon's. She didn't want to talk to her father and felt resentful towards her mother. Shannon did her best to console her granddaughter, explaining that life is not always straightforward at first glance, and one never knows the right thing to do. "Grandma, but you always did the right thing, didn't you?" Ella asked. "Sweetheart, that's impossible. I'm just an ordinary person who has stumbled many times along the way. You're just beginning to live, and you must understand that. Someday I'll tell you about our family, your grandmothers, grandfathers, great-grandmothers, and great-grandfathers. By the way, your great-grandmother Jolene lives in the village. I've already told her that I found you, and she's eager to meet you soon." Ella smiled. "Wow, I didn't even know I had a great-grandmother." "Well, now you know, sweetheart." "Grandma, can I stay with you, even just for a little while? You see, I don't know how to behave at home now. Mom is always upset. Dad turned out not to be my dad. I feel like I'm not needed by them at all." "Of course, you can stay with me," Shannon smiled. "I'd be happy about that. But you must ask your mom, and your dad too." "But he's not my dad." Ella shook her head. Chad is, essentially, a stranger to me. Ella, listen, sometimes your biological father may not care for you, but the one who raises you puts their soul into you, and that person deserves to be called your father. Has Chad ever hurt you? You've lived for 15 years without even suspecting that he wasn't your biological father. What has changed now? You won't have another dad. You yourself said that your biological father passed away. Is that true? Yes, that's what Mom told me. See, you've never seen him once. But Chad has always been there. Don't hurt this man. And what about my other grandparents? My real dad's parents? They came, but Mom chased them away. Literally closed the door in their face. Shannon shook her head. Oh, Natalie. And where did she get such a character? She paused for a moment, then looked at her granddaughter intently. Ask your mom to introduce you to them. Your grandmother and grandfather have the right to that, and so do you. But Grandma, they kicked us out a long time ago. Ella said. That was a long time ago. Shannon told her. They made a mistake then, but they lost a lot. They lost their son. They didn't see you grow up. They didn't see you becoming such a beauty. Your mom left our home once. She made a mistake too, but we didn't kick her out. We loved her, and we still do. Do you really think it would be right if we hadn't forgiven her and didn't want to communicate with you now? Is that good? To nurse one's grudges? No, it's not good. Ella shook her head. Well, there you go. Thank you, Grandma. I understand everything now. And now I'll call Mom and ask her to let me stay with you. Natalie felt awful. She was alone at home. Chad hadn't returned for 3 days, and his phone was unreachable. Ella stayed with Grandma. It's like everyone forgot about Natalie. Is that fair? Natalie thought. I fought for my happiness for so long. I wanted a real family, and I did everything for it. I dreamed of proving to everyone that I could live without them. My parents had their own lives. My sister Vanessa betrayed me completely. I hoped fate would punish her, but Vanessa is perfectly happy. Is that fair? I left them to show that I'm worth something too, but I can't forgive betrayal. And now it seems that everyone has turned away from me because of it. Even my own family. My daughter and husband. Natalie shivered. She wanted to get up to grab another blanket, but couldn't bring herself to do it. Her head was pounding, and nausea was creeping up her throat. With weakened hands, she wiped her sweaty forehead. What's happening to me? She said, frightened, turned her head, and saw the phone lying on the nightstand. She picked it up and dialed the emergency number. I feel so weak, and my heart is pounding hard. She complained to the dispatcher. I feel like I'm dying. Natalie gave her address. Then she tried to call Chad again, and this time he answered her call. Sorry, I'm busy. Her husband said unusually sternly. I called an ambulance. Natalie said, Chad, I'm not feeling well. The man didn't respond. The call ended abruptly, and Natalie burst into tears. She suddenly realized she was losing him. They had lived together for so many years, and she allowed herself to be loved. She behaved towards him as if she were a queen. She thought it wasn't her but him who owed her everything. And now he was gone. Her husband. He would never return to her. Chad would never smile at her again, never hug her, never call her his own. She remembered how he looked at her when she talked to the Seaton parents. It was as if he was seeing Natalie for the first time, or not recognizing her at all. Then he left. Chad left quietly, taking only the most necessary things with him. Natalie lay with her eyes closed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her daughter had grown up and left. She was fine somewhere, but not with her mother. Suddenly she understood exactly how her own mother felt when she, Natalie, left home after showering everyone with insults. And her father left then, and Vanessa. But all this happened because of her, because of Natalie. She envied her sister's relationship with Gary, and now she could barely remember what he looked like. Now she loved Chad, and she needed no one else but him. Chad. Chad, I love you so much. I only realize it now. Please don't leave me. I'm so scared. And so lonely, and I'm not going anywhere. Came his familiar voice nearby. Don't be afraid, darling. I'm with you. After a while, the ambulance arrived. Natalie was taken to the hospital. Chad went with her eagerly. He was impatiently waiting for the doctor examining his wife to come out of the office. And as soon as he appeared, Chad rushed to him. What's wrong with my wife? Is she sick? Is it serious? No, she's not sick. But it's all very serious. The doctor smiled for some reason, then patted Chad on the shoulder. Your wife is pregnant. So congratulations. Chad's legs trembled. He couldn't believe his ears. Was this really happening? Putting on a white coat, the man hurried to the room where Natalie lay. My dear, have they told you yet? She nodded, and he read confusion in her eyes. My dear, why are you upset? No, I'm not upset. She shook her head. On the contrary, I'm very happy about it. But I never imagined it could happen. Chad, I'm going to give you a wonderful son. Don't you want that? I want it more than anything. Chad looked at his wife tenderly. God, if only you knew how happy I am. Natalie spent almost a week in the hospital. The doctors insisted on her undergoing a full examination and only discharged her when they were sure that she was fine. Chad, Shannon, and Ella visited her constantly. Don't worry, honey, Shannon reassured her. We've gotten to know Chad, and we get along very well. Ella stays overnight either at home with her dad or with me, so don't worry about her. My dear girl, I'm so glad everything is going well for you. By the way, Vanessa, your sister, told me she's also expecting a baby, her third child, a girl. And who do you want? I want to give Chad a son. The woman smiled. He already has a daughter, Natalie. I've been thinking. Shannon cautiously began, unsure of her daughter's reaction. Grandma Jolene's birthday is coming up soon. It would be great if we all got together at her place. Celebrate the occasion. Stay there in the village for a few days. At least, we'd give her some gifts. And just spend some time together. How do you feel about that? That sounds wonderful, Mom. Let's all go there together for real. And also, please call Vanessa. Maybe she can come. I really want to see everyone. Immediately after being discharged, Chad wanted to take his girls home. But Natalie put her hand on his arm. Chad, please take us to 17 Colin Street. It's been so many years, but I feel like I could find that house with my eyes closed. Why? Ella, who was sitting next to them, asked in surprise. I want you, Ella, to meet Seaton's parents. Your dad's parents. They're elderly now, and I don't want to feel guilty for the rest of my life for not letting them see you. A couple of years ago, nothing could have made me do this. But is it the pregnancy? Or my mom? Well, what's the difference? If something inside has changed, and I myself wanted to open this closed door of my soul, then what does it matter who or what influenced it? Yes, I agree, Chad said. And you are doing the right thing. He smiled. 20 minutes later, the car pulled up to the house, and she asked Chad to accompany them. Mrs. Nilsson opened the door, and when she recognized Natalie, she clapped her hands. The woman saw her face, saw her trembling cheeks, how she pressed her hand to her lips. Natalie stepped towards the woman, and Mrs. Nilsson embraced her, burying her face in her shoulder. She couldn't speak, only breathe heavily and intermittently. Natalie, Ella, my dear girls, honey, come who quickly. See who's come to us. She bustled around her guests. Natalie, Chad, come in, my beloved granddaughter. Oh, what joy. Mr. Nilsson also couldn't contain his emotions. He seemed to rejuvenate before their eyes, welcoming the dear guests. And while Mrs. Nilsson set the table, he talked with everyone. To Chad's great surprise, they found a common language very quickly. They would have talked until late into the night if Mrs. Nilsson hadn't called them to the table. There was no stiffness between them anymore. and the few hours they spent together flew by unnoticed. When bidding farewell to their dear guests, Mrs. Nelson couldn't hold back her tears. She had already apologized several times that evening and now repeated her words. "Stop it, Mrs. Nelson," Natalie said. "We all make mistakes. It's important to recognize and correct them on time." "I'm sure," Mrs. Nelson smiled. "Your mom is a wonderful and kind person. I would really like to meet her." "Well, I can offer you a wonderful occasion for that. Soon my grandma will have her birthday. She lives in the village, and we all want to go there to congratulate her. Come with us. Is that convenient?" Mrs. Nelson looked puzzled. "Of course, it's convenient," Natalie smiled. "You know, I have a wonderful family. Everyone is very kind and loving. We're all proud, and if we ask for something, it's just once. But everyone in my family has a kind soul." "Thank you, Natalie. We have a lot ahead of us, don't we?" "Of course, we do," Natalie smiled. She felt like shedding a few tears, simply because she felt so good right now. That morning, Jolene woke up early. She woke up with a strange feeling. She felt very light and good. Nothing hurt at all. It was just wonderful. "Well, birthday girl," she said to herself, "since everything is so wonderful, it's time to make pies." "Aiden," she called her husband. "Time to get up." "I've been up for a while, my dear," he said, appearing from the next room with a bouquet of beautiful flowers. "Here, dear, this is specially for you. Happy birthday." "Oh, don't remind me." Jolene laughed and waved her hands, but then she accepted the flowers, warmly thanking her husband for the congratulations. "You know, I once thought I'd spend my old age alone. I wasn't lucky in love when I was young. And then I met you, Aiden. I met you when I had already stopped dreaming about it." "Why is that?" "Because everyone has their own destiny," he replied. "Some are happy in their youth, some in middle age, and some in old age. I think happiness is valued the most in old age." They sat together on the couch for a long time, embracing each other. It was very touching. And then they couldn't seem to let go of each other's hands. But finally, Jolene snapped out of it. "Oh my God. Why am I just sitting here? Shannon is supposed to come with her family. I promised to bake pies." "Well then, let me help you. Together we'll get it done faster." Closer to lunchtime, the guests started arriving. Jolene just exclaimed and waved her hands, greeting them and accepting congratulations and gifts. And then at the set table, right in the courtyard, her big family gathered. Here was her daughter Shannon, both granddaughters, Natalie and Vanessa, with their families, and great-grandchildren, and Mr. and Mrs. Nelson. Wonderful, kind people who immediately endeared themselves to everyone. The noise and merriment didn't stop until late in the evening. They reminisced about Jolene's parents, her sister Lynette, Jacob, who loved Lynette so much. Jolene felt like they were somewhere nearby, seeing them all and rejoicing with them. Jolene looked at her dear ones and smiled with a quiet and calm smile. There it was, true happiness. Happiness that isn't just given away. It needs to be earned with a good soul, heart, and the ability to love, understand, and forgive. Aiden hugged his wife Jolene, and she smiled back at him.